This video is going to look at how organisms survive adverse conditions and also how they avoid them, and it's going to look at the types of dormancy. So dormancy is part of some organisms' life cycle, and it allows them to survive during a period where the cost of continued normal metabolic activity would be too high. So think about like a cold winter, a dormant mouse is going to hibernate. And during this period, they have to save energy. And to do this, they're going to decrease their metabolic rate. So the heart rate is going to decrease. The heart doesn't need to pump blood as quickly around the body because the tissues require less oxygen and nutrients. The breathing rate's going to decrease. We've got a lower demand for oxygen. Respiration is going to slow down, and that's going to further conserve energy. The body temperature is going to drop. So in lots of animals, especially those that hibernate, the body temperature is going to be reduced to match the cooler environment. And again, that's going to prevent heat loss, reduce the need for constant energy input to maintain this warmth. And all of these changes are going to work together to minimise energy expenditure and conserve energy. So during periods when the resources like food, warmth are really scarce, it's going to allow that organism to survive harsh conditions until the environment becomes more favourable. So there's two types of dormancy. It can be predictive dormancy or consequential dormancy. And what predictive means is this is dormancy that occurs before the onset of the adverse conditions. So what this means is the organism is going to become dormant before the bad conditions arrive. It's going to predict them, usually based on things like seasonal signals. So the day might get shorter, there's less sunlight, or the colder weather is going to come. So trees in autumn, they're going to form winter buds before winter actually comes, and they're going to stay really tightly wrapped until day length increases in spring, and then that normal metabolic activity can resume. So second type is consequential dormancy, and this occurs after the onset of adverse conditions. And we can see this in lungfish when the animal only enters a dormant state after drought has occurred rather than in advance. So when this seasonal drought occurs and the water dries up, the lungfish is going to burrow down into the mud, it's going to make a cocoon around its body, and it's going to slow down its metabolic processes to conserve energy. And that's going to allow them to survive that adverse conditions for months, even years, until the water returns. And that's really beneficial because it's allowing them to make use of resources in their environment for as long as they possibly can. But there's a cost because there's really high mortality rates associated with waiting. So there's three types of dormancy that animals can use to survive adverse conditions. And remember, this is where they're staying put in the same location and they're surviving until favourable conditions return. And again, all of these types of dormancy are characterised by low metabolic rate, low heart rate, low breathing rate, and low body temperature. So the first one we're going to look at is hibernation, or I think of it as winter sleep. And this is dormancy that allows survival in winter or through low temperatures. So for example, things like bears and hedgehogs are going to hibernate over winter. And we say that this type of dormancy can be predictive or consequential. So it can occur before the onset of adverse conditions or after the onset of adverse conditions. Estivation I think of as summer sleep, and this dormancy is allowing animals to survive very hot or dry conditions such as drought. And we see this in things like the lungfish that we just talked about, and also in mugger crocodiles as well. We say that this is consequential as they wait for the unfavourable conditions to arise before they estivate. So they're making use of the resources for as long as they can, but it has high mortality rates. And then the last one, I think of it as a wee sleep. So daily torpor is a period of reduced activity in animals with high metabolic rates. And this is usually every 24 hours. So things like hummingbirds, they have really high metabolic costs. They need a short daily rest where their animals are going to slow down their body processes to save energy. So hibernation, we're thinking of as winter sleep. Estivation, we're thinking of as summer sleep, and daily torpor, we're thinking of as a wee sleep, so every 24 hours. So we've looked at how animals survive adverse conditions through dormancy, but how can animals avoid adverse conditions completely? So organisms use behavioural strategies to avoid these adverse conditions by the process of migration. And migration is this regular movement of members of a species from one place to another over a relatively long distance. So things like birds flying south for the winter. And migration's avoiding the need to reduce metabolic rate by moving to an environment where these conditions are staying favourable. So they've got plentiful food, high temperature, for example. So instead of lowering their metabolic rates, they're flying. Certain birds in the UK are going to fly to Africa, where the food is still really plentiful. And this is different from hibernation or estivations, where they're staying put and actively slowing their metabolism down to survive. And the benefit of that is it's allowing relocation to a more suitable environment, but the cost is that they're going to have to put in a lot of energy in order to do that. So lastly, migratory behaviour can be innate or learned. And innate means that animals are born knowing the route or the timing of their migration. So many birds are just going to instinctively fly south in the autumn without being taught. When it's learned behaviour, the animals are going to learn the route or the timing of their migration by experience. So this is often by following or watching their parents. So young geese are going to follow their parents on the first migration, and then they remember the route in later years. So innate, we're inheriting it from our parents, but learned, we're gaining it from experience or from watching our parents. And scientists want to study migration to know things like when animals migrate, where they're going to overwinter, if they return for the summer, how long they're going to live for. And in order to study this, they use these specialist techniques. So things like satellite tracking. So a small GPS tracker might be attached to the animal, and this allows us to see their migration route. The other thing that we can use are leg rings. So this is when individual animals have a little tag put onto their legs, and this allows them to be identified when they return.